In a heartwarming yet unsettling tale, a compassionate individual finds a small, vulnerable German Shepherd puppy shivering in the frigid cold, left abandoned by the roadside. He takes it upon himself to care for the puppy, nurturing it back to health and forming a deep, unbreakable connection with the animal. However, as time progresses, he begins to sense that something is not quite right. Then, one pivotal night, shocking revelations come to light. What he thought was a dog may actually be something entirely different. The narrative raises questions about the nature of this creature and the consequences that arise when authorities become involved. Before diving deeper into the plot, viewers are encouraged to share their current locations in the comments and reminded to subscribe if they enjoy the unfolding story. Logan's grip on the steering wheel tightened, his knuckles turning pale as he maneuvered through the relentless storm. After enduring 24 hours of non-stop emergency calls, exhaustion settled deeply in his bones. The steady rhythm of his windshield wipers created a near-sleepy effect, while raindrops hammered against his windshield like sharp projectiles, distorting the dark road ahead into mere shadows and reflections. "Almost home," he murmured to himself, leaning forward slightly as he approached a familiar curve on Highway 16. Typically, this deserted stretch of road would offer him a chance to relax, but tonight, the severe weather demanded his complete focus. As his headlights illuminated the slick asphalt, something unusual caught his attention, a small dark figure lying on the side of the road. Logan squinted, his instincts as a firefighter overpowering his fatigue. He gently eased off the accelerator and pulled over onto the shoulder. For a moment, he paused, listening to the rain drumming incessantly on the roof of his truck. Common sense told him to just drive on. He was weary, and it could merely be debris from the storm. Yet, years of rescue experience had taught him the importance of trusting his instincts. Retrieving his flashlight from the glove compartment, Logan stepped out into the downpour. The torrential rain soaked through his shirt in an instant, yet he scarcely paid attention to it as he drew closer to the enigmatic figure before him. His flashlight pierced the thick darkness, and he felt a tightness in his chest as he discovered a puppy curled up in a sorrowful little ball. Its fur was matted against its small frame, making it resemble a drenched rat more than a dog. As Logan crouched down to get a better look, the tiny creature lifted its head just a fraction and emitted the faintest whimper he had ever heard. "Hello there, little one," Logan spoke softly, already beginning to remove his jacket. "Let's get you somewhere warm." He wrapped the jacket around the shivering animal, holding it close to his chest. The puppy offered no resistance, likely too exhausted to even try. Once inside his truck, Logan cranked up the heat, feeling the rapid rhythm of the puppy's heartbeat against his palm as he cradled it in one hand while steering with the other. "You're going to be all right," he reassured the small creature, glancing down at the bundle resting in his lap. "We'll take you to the vet first thing in the morning. I know they open at 8 because my friend Eddie is always grumbling about how busy they are in the mornings." When he arrived home, Logan took the puppy straight to his bathroom. He quickly grabbed his softest towel and began to gently dry off the fragile little animal. Beneath all that wet fur lay a thin body that tightened his throat with concern. The pup's eyes were barely open, but Logan could see their warm brown hue peeking out. Working swiftly yet cautiously, he gathered some old blankets and arranged them near the heater in his living room, fashioning a snug nest for the puppy. He placed the small creature in the center, observing as it instinctively curled into a tight ball, still trembling slightly despite being dry. Finally, Logan sank down onto his couch, feeling overwhelmed by the circumstances. Logan couldn't avert his attention from the small puppy. He wondered where it had come from and if there was a concerned family out there, searching for it amid the storm. He planned to look for missing pet notices the next day, but as fatigue took over, he felt his eyelids getting heavy. Just as he was about to fall asleep, he heard a faint chirping coming from the puppy's makeshift bed, almost resembling a bird's song. Even though dawn was still hours away, Logan awoke to unfamiliar sounds. His neck throbbed from having slept awkwardly on the couch, and for a moment, he struggled to recall why he wasn't in his own bed. Then he heard the sound again, tiny scratching noises and some rustling near the heater. The storm had cleared, leaving a serene silence, punctuated only by the rhythmic dripping of water from the gutters. Rubbing his eyes, Logan sat up and glanced at the improvised bed he had set up. The puppy was awake, its small body moving gracefully in a way that reminded him more of a stretching cat than a dog. "Hey there," he whispered softly, not wishing to frighten the little animal. Moving cautiously, he made his way to the kitchen and returned holding a small bowl filled with water and some shredded turkey from his refrigerator. He placed them beside the puppy's blanket nest. The puppy's nose twitched at the food. However, after a cautious sniff, it turned its head away. Logan frowned, feeling a wave of concern wash over him. Although he had taken care of many rescued animals before, thanks to his sister's habit of bringing home strays, he had never encountered one so young and delicate. "You need something in your system, buddy," he said gently, dipping his finger into the water. He then carefully brought it to the puppy's mouth. This time, the reaction was instant. The tiny creature began to respond eagerly. Eagerly, the puppy was licking at Logan's fingertip, its pink tongue darting out to catch every last drop. As Logan continued this interaction, he found himself ensnared by the puppy's gaze. Its eyes were large and dark, almost too aware for such a young creature. There was something unique about the way the puppy eagerly licked at Logan's fingertip, its small pink tongue darting out to catch every drop. As he continued this process, Logan found himself caught in the puppy's gaze. Its large dark eyes appeared almost too aware for such a young animal. There was something about how it looked at him that made him stop and think. It was an indescribable feeling. Something felt different, not quite right. With sleep now impossible, Logan picked up his phone and settled back onto the couch, the puppy attentively watching his every action. He opened his browser and began searching for information on how to care for an abandoned puppy. He searched for topics like what to feed a very young puppy and signs of puppy dehydration. Numerous pages popped up with advice, some of which was helpful while other information contradicted itself. Suddenly, a soft rustling noise drew his attention again. The puppy was attempting to stand, wobbling slightly, but showing more strength than before. Its legs appeared unusually long and fragile as it stretched, then let out a high-pitched chirp that echoed through the room. Logan frowned as he lowered his phone. This sound was unlike any bark he had ever heard. It resembled more of a bird's call than anything you would expect from a dog. The following morning, sunlight flooded into Logan's living room, casting golden stripes across the floor. He stretched his stiff muscles and listened to the gentle clicking of tiny claws on the hardwood surface. The puppy he had rescued the night before was already awake and exploring, its nose twitching as it sniffed each corner of the room. Though still somewhat unsteady, it exhibited much more vitality than it had during the storm, taking careful steps and stopping frequently to investigate everything around it. Logan chuckled as he watched the little creature discover a dropped pen cap, pouncing on it with unexpected agility. "Feeling better, huh?" he remarked. In the peaceful atmosphere of his kitchen, Logan gently cracked open eggs into a frying pan, preparing a breakfast sizable enough for both himself and a small serving for his little companion. The enticing sound of sizzling breakfast immediately caught the puppy's attention. Its ears, which were surprisingly large for its tiny frame, perked up in response to the noise. When Logan placed a small plate of scrambled eggs on the floor, the puppy approached it with caution. It sniffed at the food, but then exhibited unusual behavior rather than consuming the eggs right there. It took small bites and attempted to carry them away, seeking out hiding spots behind the trash can and beneath the kitchen cabinets. "That's an interesting choice," Logan remarked to himself as he observed this strange behavior, his curiosity growing. After finishing their meal, the puppy continued to venture around the house, gaining confidence with each room it explored. Logan noted that it completely disregarded the cozy dog bed he had thoughtfully placed near the heater. Instead, the puppy found a snug spot underneath the couch, curling itself into a tight ball with its fluffy tail wrapped around its body. From this hidden refuge, it watched Logan with bright, intelligent eyes. As the morning light illuminated the pup's reddish-brown fur, Logan suddenly felt inspired to give it a name. "Rusty," he said softly, trying out the name. The puppy's large ears flicked in response to his voice, yet it remained motionless, observing him from its concealed position. Logan then picked up his keys and wallet, ensuring that Rusty was safe in the living room while he made a brief visit to the nearby pet store. He stocked up on essential supplies, including puppy food, chew toys, a small blue collar, and a lightweight leash. The cashier looked over the photos he shared of Rusty, expressing that she had never seen a puppy quite like him. Logan had never encountered a puppy like Rusty back home. Sitting on the floor with his legs crossed, he held up a soft blue ball that squeaked when squeezed, a recent purchase of his. Rusty cautiously emerged from beneath the couch, intrigued by the ball. Instead of chasing it as Logan expected, Rusty leaped onto it, shaking it vigorously as if trying to assert dominance over it. To Logan's amusement, the little puppy then began to nudge and push the ball until it rolled out of sight under the couch, joining his collection of hidden treasures. Logan couldn't help but chuckle at Rusty's antics, affectionately remarking on how peculiar the dog was as he watched Rusty's tail disappear again under the furniture. The sun shone brightly overhead as Logan carried Rusty toward his truck. The small puppy, already more energetic than he had been the night before, squirmed in Logan's arms like a lively slinky toy. Logan gently placed him on the passenger seat, but Rusty wasted no time exploring, using his nimble body to investigate every nook and cranny with surprising grace. "Hold still, little guy," Logan said as he tried to wrap a blanket around the energetic pup, who skillfully avoided his hands and climbed over the center console. At the veterinary clinic, the waiting room was filled with a sharp scent of antiseptic mixed with pet shampoo. A warm greeting came from Dr. Patel, a woman with kind eyes and gentle hands. Her dark hair was neatly tied back in a bun as she ushered them into the examination room. "Let's take a look at this little fellow," she said, lifting Rusty onto the metal examination table. Her experienced hands moved carefully over his small body, checking for any issues or concerns. His teeth, eyes, and limbs caught her attention. She observed that his teeth were notably sharp, and his legs appeared longer than one would expect for a German Shepherd mix. She stole a glance at Logan and asked about the dog's behavior. Logan replied by shaking his head and explained that instead of barking, the dog made peculiar chirping noises and exhibited unusual eating habits, hiding his food throughout the house and preferring to remain concealed under furniture. Dr. Patel raised an eyebrow, intrigued, as she completed her examination. Suddenly, Rusty wriggled out of Logan's grasp with surprising agility and hopped onto the counter, skillfully maneuvering around medical supplies as if he were a cat. Dr. Patel gently caught him, a look of surprise mixed with amusement on her face, and noted that he was truly one of a kind. After carefully placing Rusty back on the examination table, she confirmed that he was overall healthy and suggested genetic testing if they wanted to learn more about his breed. Logan shrugged, scratching behind Rusty's ears, stating that it didn't matter since he was just a mutt. The drive home felt lighter for Logan, who was relieved that Rusty had been given a clean bill of health. Once back in the living room, he watched his quirky new pet make himself comfortable. Rusty leaped across the floor and in one graceful movement, climbed onto the back of the couch, balancing there like a cat on a narrow ledge. Logan couldn't help but laugh, acknowledging Rusty's uniqueness while declaring him his own. Rusty responded with a high-pitched chirp, his bright eyes focused intently on Logan's face, as if he understood every word. That night, as Logan fell asleep, he could hear Rusty's chirping, and in the morning, Golden sunlight streamed through the windows, casting stripes across Logan's living space. As Logan blinked awake on the room floor, he noticed that his neck was sore from having slept in an awkward position. However, a warm feeling filled his heart when he saw Rusty nestled in the corner of the couch. The reddish-brown fur of the small creature caught the soft rays of early morning light, and its tiny body was curled up tightly into a ball, with its bushy tail wrapped around it like a miniature fox. A smile spread across Logan's face as he suddenly realized how empty his home had felt prior to the arrival of this peculiar little companion. Throughout the morning hours, Logan busied himself with helping Rusty acclimate to his new surroundings. He set up a designated feeding area in the kitchen, complete with matching bowls for food and water. However, Rusty's attention seemed to be captured more by everything else in the house. He zipped from one corner to another, his nose quivering as he explored each unfamiliar scent. Rusty squeezed himself behind the bookshelf, vanished under the TV stand, and to Logan's dismay, even attempted to climb the living room curtains with surprising agility. "Hey now," Logan called out as he caught Rusty in the act mid-climb. "Those aren't meant for climbing." In an effort to engage Rusty, Logan tried to entice him with the toys he had purchased from the pet store. He rolled a squeaky ball across the floor, but Rusty simply watched it roll past, tilting his head in confusion. However, when Logan presented him with a plush rabbit, Rusty's attitude shifted dramatically. He sprang onto it with remarkable accuracy, shaking it fiercely from side to side as if it were real prey. Later in the day, Logan decided it was time for their first walk around the block. However, putting the leash on Rusty turned out to be quite a challenge, as the little creature squirmed and twisted, clearly unhappy with the restraint. Once they were finally outside, Rusty resisted moving forward. As Logan walked alongside Rusty, he noticed that Rusty did not behave like other dogs, who walked calmly by their owner's side. Instead, Rusty dashed ahead, his nose glued to the ground, moving swiftly with an intention that resembled a predator on the hunt, rather than taking a leisurely walk. A neighbor commented on Rusty's distinctive markings, asking Logan what breed he was. Logan replied that Rusty was a rescue dog while observing how Rusty perked up his ears at a sound in the distance, still getting used to his new environment. As evening fell, Logan started cooking dinner in the kitchen. Despite his attempts to keep Rusty from jumping onto the counters, the mischievous little dog had claimed a spot near the microwave as his own personal lookout. From this vantage point, Rusty watched Logan's every action with keen interest, especially when food was involved. Logan chuckled at his quirky little friend and remarked on Rusty's odd behavior. In response, Rusty let out his familiar chirp, his bright eyes never leaving Logan's hands as he prepared dinner. The following morning arrived with a cool and clear atmosphere as Logan packed his duffel bag for his shift at the fire station. He caught sight of Rusty perched on the kitchen counter, watching him closely. The idea of leaving his unique companion alone for an entire day made Logan feel uneasy. He turned to Rusty and asked if he wanted to accompany him to work. Rusty responded by tilting his head, his eyes fixed on Logan's face. After a brief moment of thought, Logan took the new blanket he had purchased for Rusty and made his way to the truck, with Rusty happily trotting behind him. Upon arriving at the firehouse, Logan and Rusty's entrance attracted a lot of attention. His co-workers gathered around, their expressions revealing a blend of curiosity and amusement as they observed the unusual duo together. The little creature that was meant to be a puppy looked more like it belonged in the wilderness, according to Eddie, Logan's best friend, who crossed his arms and smirked. "Are you sure you didn't rescue a baby coyote or something?" he joked. Logan sighed and rolled his eyes, insisting that Rusty was just unique in his own way. Throughout the day, Rusty demonstrated his adventurous spirit. He moved stealthily around the station, often appearing in the most unexpected locations. The crew would discover him curled up inside their turnout gear or hidden away in partially open lockers. His movements were so quiet that on several occasions, someone would jump in surprise upon realizing he had been silently observing them from behind. During lunchtime, Rusty displayed his cleverness. He turned down the dog treats offered by the crew, but cleverly managed to snatch pieces of their sandwiches when they weren't paying attention. Logan only caught him in the act because he noticed Rusty discreetly hiding his pilfered treasures behind the couch in the break room. The true challenge arose when Sparky, the station's cherished Dalmatian, approached to investigate this new arrival. As the larger dog neared him, Rusty's demeanor shifted dramatically. His fur stood on end, and he emitted a sound that caused everyone to stop in their tracks, a low, guttural chirp that was anything but typical for a dog. Sparky halted abruptly, his tail drooping in confusion before slowly backing away. Logan observed this interaction with increasing worry, taking note of Rusty's evident unease around other dogs. As night fell and the crew settled in for the evening, Logan made a small bed for Rusty beside his bunk, using a blanket from home to make it feel inviting. He eventually drifted into sleep, only to awaken in the dark hours to discover that. In the dimly lit room, Logan noticed that his bed was empty, and his eyes scanned the darkness until they landed on Rusty's silhouette, perched on the window ledge. The little dog sat perfectly still, gazing out into the night sky. "You really are something else," Logan whispered softly to the shadows. At the sound of his voice, Rusty turned his head, his eyes catching the faint light and shining brightly like small moons. After a moment, he opened his mouth and emitted a soft, eerie yip that reverberated through the otherwise quiet firehouse. As morning began to break, the sounds typical of the fire warehouse filled the air, including the bubbling of the coffee maker, the static-filled chatter of dispatch radios, and the rhythmic sound of boots striking the concrete floor as firefighters got ready for their day. Logan let out a yawn while stretching his body as he stepped out of the bunk room. He looked around for Rusty but didn't see him in his usual hangouts. "Hey, has anyone seen Rusty?" Logan called out, trying to mask the concern creeping into his tone. When there was no response, he felt a surge of anxiety and his heart began to race. He searched behind the couch in the break room, under the beds, and even checked the locker room. After 15 increasingly frantic minutes, Logan finally spotted a flash of reddish-brown fur in the engine bay. There, nestled in a dark corner, was Rusty, curled up on a pile of old shop rags with his nose tucked under his tail. "There you are!" Logan exclaimed with a sigh of relief, chuckling lightly. "You had me worried, buddy." His teammates gathered around to look at the unusual sight, and one of them remarked, "That's strange. I've never seen a dog hide like that before." Back at home, Logan began observing more odd behaviors from Rusty. For instance, the food bowl he had bought for his dog remained untouched while bits of kibble continued to accumulate in it. Rusty had a peculiar habit of appearing in unexpected locations, often found hidden away behind the couch, snuggled in blankets, or even wedged between the cushions during daylight hours. He seemed to prefer the darker nooks of the house for his daytime naps. However, once night fell, he transformed into a bundle of energy, racing around the home with an astonishing vigor. His level of alertness was almost eerie. Every minute sound, from the refrigerator's hum to the far-off calls of birds, caused his ears to twitch and swivel like tiny radar dishes. One evening, Eddie came over and observed Rusty's behavior as he flitted from shadow to shadow, moving with a unique, nimble elegance. Amused, Eddie joked, "Man, you sure you didn't rescue a raccoon? That ain't normal dog behavior." Logan chuckled along but couldn't shake off Eddie's words. They lingered in his mind, making him contemplate whether he should take Rusty back to the vet for further evaluation. That night, Logan decided it was time to engage in some basic training with Rusty. Armed with a handful of treats, he positioned himself in the living room, resolved to teach Rusty fundamental commands starting with sit. He asserted the command firmly, holding up a treat as bait. Rusty gazed at him intently, his bright eyes full of focus, yet he made no attempt to follow the command. "Come on, buddy, sit," Logan encouraged. Rusty responded by tilting his head, before suddenly zooming around the room, playfully weaving between furniture legs. After several unsuccessful attempts at teaching Rusty to stay and come, Logan sank onto the couch with a frustrated sigh, rubbing his eyes in exasperation. Moments later, he felt a gentle weight beside him. Rusty had jumped up and curled into a tight ball against Logan's leg, emitting a soft chirp that seemed to be a comforting gesture. As the week progressed, Logan found himself observing Rusty more attentively, intrigued by his unique quirks and behaviors. At first, the changes in Rusty were subtle and gradual. His coat began to take on a deeper, more vibrant reddish hue, which gave him a richer appearance. The clumsy awkwardness of his puppyhood was diminishing, giving way to a more athletic and graceful physique that made his movements appear fluid and smooth. One morning, Logan spoke softly to him, acknowledging the transformation by saying, "You're getting bigger, buddy," while he ran his hand along initially. The changes in Rusty were subtle. The color of his coat seemed to deepen, adopting a more vibrant reddish hue that caught Logan's attention. As time passed, Rusty's initially clumsy movements began to fade away, giving way to a sleek and graceful physique that made his motions appear fluid. Logan chuckled at Eddie's joke, but there was something about it that resonated with him. After Eddie departed, Logan found himself pausing for a moment before he typed "fox behavior" into the search bar. His heart raced slightly as he began to delve into the articles, which described behaviors that felt strangely familiar, such as being active at night, storing food, making chirping sounds known as gearing, living a solitary life, and showing a reluctance to interact with other dogs. With every new piece of information, Logan's confidence in Rusty's true nature started to waver. That evening, seeking clarity, Logan attached a leash to Rust for a late-night stroll. The streets were calm, softly lit by the glow of streetlights. Rusty walked alongside him, but his movements no longer had the playful essence of a puppy. Each step seemed deliberate and silent. As they neared the park, Rusty suddenly grew tense, tugging on the leash and urging Logan toward the shadows beyond the illuminated path. A sense of unease washed over Logan as he tightened his grip on the leash. Rusty halted and glanced back at him, and in the artificial light, his eyes shimmered in a way that felt unsettling. Then, to Logan's shock, Rusty emitted a chirp, a sound that lingered in the stillness of the night. Wild and eerie, completely atypical for a dog. Later, Logan sat at his kitchen table, cradling a warm coffee mug as he gazed at his laptop screen, which was filled with various tabs. He was researching topics like red fox behavior, fox pets, and fox vocalizations. Nearby, Rusty lay curled up on the windowsill, his tail wrapped tightly around him in a manner that was distinctly undog-like. The morning sunlight illuminated Rusty's fur, accentuating the deep auburn hues that adorned his coat. Over the last few weeks, Logan had been increasingly intrigued by the similarities between his dog Rusty and foxes. As he read yet another article detailing fox behaviors, he noticed how closely they resembled Rusty's own quirky habits. Later that day, Logan returned to Dr. Patel's veterinary clinic. The familiar smell of antiseptic filled the air of the examination room as he shifted anxiously from one foot to the other. "This might sound a bit strange," Logan started, observing Dr. Patel as she carefully examined Rusty, "but is there any possibility he could have some fox in him?" Initially, Dr. Patel chuckled at the notion, but her expression turned serious as she focused more on Rusty. She examined his long legs and sharp facial features, commenting thoughtfully, "You know, his proportions are quite atypical for a dog. The way he moves resembles that of a predator rather than a usual household pet." After straightening up and adjusting her glasses, she added, "If you'd like to find out for certain, we could conduct a DNA test." The idea of a DNA test made Logan's stomach clench. He was taken aback by his own desire for confirmation. What seemed like a far-fetched thought just a few days prior now felt unsettlingly plausible. That evening, Logan found himself sitting on his back porch, scrutinizing Rusty more intently than ever. In the distance, an owl hooted, causing Rusty's ears to perk up and his body to tense instinctively. When he heard leaves rustling in the garden, Rusty crouched down in a manner that bore no resemblance to a playful puppy. Logan retrieved his phone and began browsing an online pet supply store, hovering his finger over the Add to Cart button for a DNA testing kit. He took a deep breath and clicked it, trying to reassure himself that he was only seeking peace of mind. But as he did so, doubt lingered in his mind. As Logan observed Rusty Sleek stealthily moving along the porch railing, he realized deep down that his suspicions were being confirmed. The living room was serene, with only the gentle sound of the wall clock ticking and the occasional creak of settling wood to break the silence. Logan was dozing off on his well-worn leather couch, one arm resting over his eyes while Rusty lay curled up tightly at his feet. This tranquil scene appeared idyllic until it suddenly shifted. Rusty abruptly raised his head, his entire body tensing as if he sensed something. His ears perked up like radar dishes, and his gaze locked onto something outside the window that Logan could not see. Before Logan had a chance to sit up straight, Rusty darted across the room in a swift blur of reddish fur. "Rusty!" Logan called out, his voice heavy with sleep, but Rusty was already at the window, his nose pressed against the small crack that Logan had left open for fresh air. In an astonishing display of agility for his size, Rusty squeezed through the narrow gap and disappeared into the darkness outside. Alarmed, Logan stumbled to his feet, nearly tripping over the coffee table in his hurry to reach the door. He quickly grabbed his flashlight from the kitchen counter and rushed outside, his heart racing as he felt the cool night air against his face. He waved the beam of light across his yard, calling out, "Rusty, come here, boy." Yet, the only reply was the rustling of leaves stirred by a gentle breeze. In a state of panic, Logan frantically searched every corner, peering behind bushes, under porches, and into every shadow his flashlight illuminated. As the hours dragged on, there was still no sign of Rusty's unique red coat or his vibrant eyes. With each passing moment, Logan's voice became more hoarse as the hours passed. There was still no indication of Rusty's unique red coat or his bright eyes. Logan's voice became hoarse from calling out for him, and his legs began to ache from walking through the neighborhood. Eventually, as midnight transitioned into early morning, the overwhelming fatigue set in, prompting Logan to make his way back home, feeling defeated. The house felt more desolate than it ever had, and the thought of sleep seemed unattainable. He turned on the back porch light and sank into his armchair, staring at the door with tired, red-rimmed eyes. Just before dawn, when the sky was beginning to shift from a deep black to a rich blue, Logan heard a gentle scratching sound at the back door. His heart raced as he hurried to open it, revealing Rusty standing there. His fur was slightly damp with morning dew, and his bright eyes were fixed intently on Logan's face. There was something new about that gaze, something enigmatic and unfathomable. Rusty entered quietly, leaving small wet paw prints on the floor. Logan exhaled a shaky breath of relief as he closed the door behind them. Rusty had returned, albeit hours later. Later on, Logan found himself sitting at his desk, fixated on an unread email in his inbox. The subject line simply read, "DNA test results for sample number 2847. His cursor hovered over it, trembling slightly while his hand hesitated to click. Rusty lay nearby, sprawled across a sunlit patch of the floor, his red coat glinting in the light. Taking a deep breath, Logan finally clicked on the email. The page loaded to reveal charts and percentages that confirmed what he had already sensed in his heart. Rusty was 100% Vulpes, a red fox, not a dog, not even part dog, but a pure wild fox. Logan leaned back in his chair, running his hands through his hair in disbelief. The room suddenly felt cramped and restricting. Logan glanced over at Rusty, who yawned and stretched, completely unaware of the gravity of the situation. "You're actually a fox," Logan murmured, the words feeling foreign as they left his lips, almost like he was speaking in another language. He redirected his attention to his computer, his fingers racing across the keyboard as he sought out information about the legality of owning a fox. With each new tab he opened, his anxiety grew as bad news piled up. Numerous articles confirmed his worst fears. Keeping a fox as a pet was outright illegal in his state. The consequences were harsh, including hefty fines. There was also the potential for jail time, and most critically, the immediate seizure of the animal. As you read about past incidents where wildlife authorities had removed illegal exotic pets from homes, his throat constricted with dread. Animals were often relocated to sanctuaries, or in worse cases, euthanized if they were deemed too domesticated to survive in the wild. The gentle sound of paws on the floor caught his attention. Rusty had settled into his usual spot by the couch, curling into a compact ball with his tail wrapped around himself. Despite his relaxed position, Rusty's bright and alert eyes watched Logan with an intense familiarity. Logan's chest tightened with realization as everything clicked into place. The chirping instead of barking, Rusty's cat-like movements, his dislike for other dogs, and his active nighttime behavior. These quirks that had once seemed odd yet charming were actually typical behaviors of a fox. He had been so oblivious, or perhaps he had chosen to see only what he wanted, a puppy in need of rescue, rather than a wild creature that required the freedom to thrive in its natural habitat. Rusty let out a soft chirp, a sound Logan now recognized as characteristic of a fox. Logan recognized the sound that echoed in his mind. It was identical to what he had heard on that rainy night when he believed he was rescuing an injured puppy. As he sank deeper into his chair, the weight of reality pressed heavily upon him. The truth was he couldn't keep Rusty, at least not in a legal sense. If someone were to report him, or if any official figure discovered Rusty's true nature, they would take him away. The mere thought of losing Rusty, of seeing someone else carry him off, made Logan's stomach churn with anxiety. He observed Rusty as he slept contentedly, completely unaware of the turmoil surrounding their situation and the possibility that everything might change for them. For the first time since that fateful stormy night when he had stumbled upon the small, trembling creature by the roadside, Logan contemplated the heartbreaking reality that he might have to say goodbye to Rusty. The following day, Logan found himself sitting in Dr. Patel's office with the printed DNA results tightly clutched in his hand. The paper bore creases from the tension he exerted while driving over. Rusty remained alert in his carrier, watching both Logan and the doctor intently. "I had my suspicions," Dr. Patel remarked gently as she adjusted her glasses to get a better look at the results. "The signs were evident, his behavior, his physical traits, but I didn't want to cause you unnecessary worry without concrete evidence. What can I do?" Logan's voice came out harsher than he meant it to be, filled with desperation. Dr. Patel's expression shifted to one of understanding and compassion. "Legally, there's not much that can be done," she explained. "Keeping a fox as a pet is illegal in this state, and I'm obligated to report the situation." Hearing this made Logan's heart feel heavy. He realized Rusty had nowhere else to go. "There are wildlife sanctuaries," she suggested kindly, "places that are equipped to care for foxes. I can help make some calls." "But he's not just a wild animal," Logan interjected, his hands tightening into fists, feeling a surge of protectiveness for Rusty. Dr. Patel recognized the difficulty of the situation, expressing understanding with a nod. He offered Logan the contact information for a wildlife rehabilitator he collaborates with, suggesting that she could provide assistance. Later that day, Logan found himself seated across from Sarah Chun, an experienced wildlife rehabilitator whose office was adorned with pictures of animals she had saved. As Logan detailed Rusty's predicament, Sarah listened carefully, occasionally affirming his words with a nod. Sarah articulated the issue clearly. Rusty had been rescued at too young an age, which led him to become overly attached to humans, particularly to Logan. Consequently, he never learned the necessary skills to survive as a wild fox. She emphasized that although it might be possible for him to learn these survival skills in a sanctuary, there were significant challenges ahead. Leaning forward in her chair, she explained that adult foxes who have been domesticated struggle to adapt to life in a sanctuary environment. They often lack the ability to interact appropriately with others of their kind, and can experience significant stress and depression. Some may fail to adapt altogether. Hearing this, Logan felt as though he had been punched in the gut. He asked Sarah about any alternatives, but she regretfully informed him that there weren't any viable options. Rusty could not legally remain with Logan, yet he also lacked the necessary skills to thrive in the wild or even in a sanctuary. Unfortunately, Rusty found himself trapped between two incompatible worlds. The ride home was filled with heavy silence as Logan's thoughts spiraled into dark possibilities, each idea more troubling than the last. That evening, he settled onto his couch, gazing at Rusty as he slept soundly in his favorite spot by the window. The gentle rise and fall of the fox's chest was a serene sight, leaving Rusty blissfully unaware of the heartbreaking decision Logan had to make. As Rusty's ear twitched in slumber, he emitted a soft chirping sound, reminiscent of the very moment Logan first fell in love with him on that rainy night. The realization. Patel, understanding the emotional weight of the situation, acknowledged Logan's struggle with a nod. He offered to provide a contact number for a wildlife rehabilitator he collaborates with, suggesting this person might be able to offer some guidance. Later that day, Logan found himself in the office of Sarah Chun, an experienced wildlife rehabilitator whose walls were adorned with images of various animals she had rescued. As Logan detailed Rusty's circumstances, Sarah listened attentively, occasionally affirming his account with a nod. Sarah then leaned forward, her tone serious as she explained the root of the problem. Rusty had been rescued too young and had formed a strong attachment to humans, particularly to Logan. This bond meant that Rusty never acquired the necessary skills to survive as a wild fox. Sarah elaborated that while it might be possible for him to learn these skills within a sanctuary, the reality was more complex. She continued, stating that adult foxes who have become accustomed to human companionship typically struggle to adapt to life in a sanctuary environment. They often don't know how to interact with other foxes, leading to significant stress and depression, with some individuals failing to adjust entirely. Logan felt overwhelmed by this information, as if he had just received devastating news. When he asked about alternative solutions, Sarah responded honestly, acknowledging the lack of good options. Legally, Rusty could not continue living with Logan, yet he was ill-suited for either life in the wild or within a sanctuary setting. He was trapped between two worlds without a clear path forward. The drive back home was filled with silence as Logan's thoughts spiraled through various scenarios, each one more troubling than the last. That evening, he settled onto his couch, observing Rusty peacefully asleep in his favorite spot beneath the window. The fox's chest rose and fell rhythmically, completely unaware of the difficult decision Logan was grappling with. As Rusty slept, his ear twitched, and he emitted a soft chirping sound, the same endearing noise that. Logan was acutely aware that his time with Rusty was limited, and he soon would need to make a choice that could significantly alter the course of both their lives. For now, however, he simply observed his friend as he slept, striving to engrave every aspect of this moment into his memory. Gradually, he succumbed to sleep himself. The following day, during his break at the firehouse, Logan found himself hunched over his phone, absorbed in a seemingly endless search for regulations concerning exotic pets. His coffee, which he had forgotten about, sat cold and untouched beside him. Every few minutes, he absent-mindedly ran his fingers through his hair, a telltale sign of his mounting frustration. The regulations were explicit and uncompromising. Logan was acutely aware that his time with Rusty was limited, and soon he would have to make a choice that would have a profound impact on both of their lives. For the moment, however, he sat quietly observing his friend as he slept, attempting to imprint every aspect of this precious moment into his memory. Gradually, Logan felt himself drifting off to sleep. The following day, during his break at the firehouse, Logan found himself hunched over his phone, immersed in a seemingly endless search for regulations regarding exotic pets. His cup of coffee had been left untouched beside him, already cold from neglect. Every few minutes, he ran his fingers through his hair, a telltale sign of his mounting frustration. The regulations were unequivocal and rigid. Owning a fox as a pet was completely prohibited. Nevertheless, he felt there must be some way around this obstacle. Losing Rusty was not an option after everything they had experienced together. He made another call, this time to a wildlife sanctuary located in a nearby state. The conversation proceeded just like all the others he had had before. "I understand your bond with your fox," the sanctuary director spoke gently, "but foxes are not suitable pets. We have excellent facilities here." Logan hung up before she could continue, having already reached out to 6 different organizations. That morning alone, he had spoken to 3 legal advisors and 2 rehabilitation centers, but each response had been identical. Rusty needed to be relinquished. Just then, Eddie entered the break room and caught the tail end of Logan's last phone conversation. He took a seat, positioning himself backwards in the chair with his arms crossed over the backrest. "You look like you're about ready to smash that phone against a wall," Eddie remarked. Logan let out a deep sigh and replied, "I've tried everything. Nobody wants to assist me in keeping him." After a brief pause, Eddie suggested, "What about special permits? I once knew someone who managed to keep a..." After being rescued, Hawk was deemed unable to be released back into the wild and was granted permission to be kept for educational reasons. Logan felt a surge of hope at this news, realizing that special permits could be issued for animals that cannot survive in their natural habitat if sufficient evidence is provided. He quickly began browsing through his photo gallery, looking for videos that captured Rusty's unique antics, such as attempts to nap in the dryer, pilfering socks, and making chirping sounds at the television. Logan had compiled numerous clips that showcased how domesticated Rusty had become. Eddie's cleverness struck Logan, who immediately began drafting an email to Dr. Patel to request an official statement regarding Rusty's level of domestication. For the next hour, he focused on gathering proof, including videos displaying Rusty's unsuccessful efforts to catch even the laziest insects and photographs, illustrating his tendency to avoid other wildlife in favor of human companionship. He even reached out to his fellow firefighters to collect testimonies about Rusty's conduct while at the fire station. That evening, Logan found himself sitting on the floor of his living room, watching Rusty as he stealthily pursued a moth that had managed to enter their home. The fox exhibited movements that were both elegant and predatory, reminiscent of his wild ancestry. However, when the moth escaped through an open window, Rusty simply returned to Logan, snuggling against his leg with a satisfied chirp. Logan affectionately scratched behind Rusty's ears, feeling the soft texture of his fur, and realized that Rusty truly belonged by his side. Now, the challenge was to persuade the authorities of this reality. The morning was brisk as Logan took Rusty along their regular walking path. The fox trotted alongside him, his vibrant red fur shining in the early daylight. Logan's expression was grave as he listened to Eddie speak quietly about Rusty Thompson's wife. It seemed she had researched fox breeds after encountering Rusty the previous week, and Mike, the new guy at work, made a joke suggesting they should call animal control. Logan felt a knot in his stomach as he tightly gripped the edge of his locker, his knuckles turning pale. He muttered to himself, realizing that if someone reported Rusty before he was granted the special permit, they would take him away immediately without any further questions. Eddie nodded solemnly in response, suggesting that perhaps it would be wise for them to keep a low profile for a while. Later that evening, Logan found himself pacing in his living room, glancing at Rusty, who was peering out the window. The fox was standing on the windowsill with his front paws resting there, his ears alert, and his nose twitching as he sniffed the cool evening air. With a firm resolution, Logan declared that they would no longer take walks or visit the station until the permit was secured. Rusty seemed to pick up on the shift in atmosphere right away. He moved from one window to another, softly chirping, his usually playful nature giving way to restlessness. He scratched at the door, looking back at Logan with eyes full of questions. Logan's heart ached at the sight of his friend's confusion. It wasn't fair to either of them, but he couldn't afford to lose Rusty, not now. As night descended, Logan meticulously checked all the windows and doors, while Rusty continued to pace behind him, still restless and hopeful for some outside time. "Just for now, buddy," Logan whispered gently as he turned the deadbolt with a decisive click and prepared for bed. A few days later, Logan drove his truck towards the wildlife sanctuary, which unfolded before him as a vast area filled with natural habitats and various enclosures. The gravel crunched beneath his tires as he entered the parking lot, and he felt his knuckles tighten around the steering wheel in anxiety. Logan had decided to leave his pet Rusty at home, feeling that he wasn't ready to bring him into this environment yet. The morning air felt refreshing and brisk, filled with the sounds of different animals. He followed the signs leading him to the main office where Samantha Green was waiting for him. She was tall and showed signs of experience, her kind eyes reflecting the many animals she had encountered over time. "Welcome to Wild Haven," she greeted him warmly, reaching out her hand. "I believe you have some questions about our fox rehabilitation program." Logan acknowledged her with a nod as he walked alongside her down a twisting pathway. Samantha began explaining their protocols, detailing how they evaluate each animal to decide if they can be reintroduced into the wild. She also mentioned those that are unable to return to their natural habitat. "Some foxes become too dependent on humans," she noted, pointing towards an enclosure in the distance. "These animals will remain here permanently so that we can guarantee their safety and provide them with proper care." As they neared the fox enclosure, a spacious area enclosed by high fences that featured natural elements like logs, brush piles, and small dens, Logan felt a wave of sadness. He observed the resident foxes, which quickly scurried away at the mere sight of humans, vanishing into the bushes or watching cautiously from afar. None of them displayed any desire to interact with people. "These are true wild foxes," Samantha remarked softly. Logan couldn't help but think about Rusty, the way he nestled comfortably on the couch, chirped when he wanted attention, and followed Logan from one room to another. He realized how starkly different Rusty's behavior was from these wary wild animals. "We provide exceptional care for them," Samantha continued, her tone both gentle and resolute. "They have ample space, nutritious food, and access to veterinary services, but they don't have a family." Logan interrupted her, his voice rough with emotion. Samantha turned to him, her face reflecting understanding and compassion. Despite his determination, Logan recognized that Rusty was fundamentally a fox. No matter how deep his affection for him ran, it was impossible to alter the essence of what Rusty was. The journey back home felt interminable. Logan's hands remained tightly clenched around the steering wheel as he replayed vivid images in his mind of the anxious foxes. He envisioned Rusty, bewildered and isolated, pondering the reasons behind his family's abandonment. The mere thought tore at Logan's heart, even while his mind grappling with the harsh truths of their circumstances. Once they arrived, the house enveloped them in a stillness that was only occasionally interrupted by the soft whir of the heater. Seated in his armchair, Logan observed Rusty as he slept peacefully on the floor. The little fox had curled himself into an adorable ball, his tail tucked securely around his body, and each gentle rise and fall of his chest signified a blissful slumber. Suddenly, a scratching noise disrupted the tranquility of the moment. Logan blinked and shifted his focus to Rusty, who had now awoken and was anxiously pawing at the back door. His movements were frantic and filled with urgency. He emitted a series of sharp chirps, his claws raking against the wooden door. "Rusty, buddy, what's the matter?" Logan called out softly as he approached cautiously. As Logan neared, Rusty's agitation seemed to escalate. The fox began pacing anxiously, his chirps evolving into urgent, high-pitched yips. His gaze flickered back and forth between Logan and the door, revealing an unsettling wildness that overshadowed his usual playful demeanor. Gone was the affectionate companion who used to snuggle beside him. Instead, Logan saw a creature caught in a conflict between two worlds. A pang of anxiety gripped Logan's chest as he witnessed Rusty's inner turmoil manifesting through his frantic movements, conveying a pressing need to respond to a distant call that Logan could not decipher. After a brief moment of uncertainty, Logan grasped the door handle and murmured softly to himself, "Okay," before swinging the door open to the refreshing evening air. Rusty was suddenly motionless at the entrance, his entire body tensed with anticipation. For what felt like an eternity, he remained still, and then, without warning, he dashed into the night. Logan's heart raced as it climbed into his throat. He quickly grabbed the flashlight from the kitchen countertop, and Rusty was paralyzed in the doorway, his entire body tense for several heartbeats. He remained still, but suddenly he dashed into the shadows like a bullet. Logan felt his heart race as he hurried to grab the flashlight from the kitchen counter and sprinted after him, his feet thudding against the damp grass. The light from the flashlight swept across the yard until it illuminated a glimpse of Rusty's red fur near the tree line. There, Rusty sat completely motionless, gazing intently into the dark woods, his ears perked up and his posture alert and wild. In that instant, he resembled the foxes at the sanctuary, embodying the essence of a forest creature rather than a domesticated pet. This realization struck Logan with the force of a physical impact. Had he been selfish? Had his affection for Rusty clouded his judgment regarding what was truly best for the fox? Rusty turned his head to meet Logan's eyes, and time seemed to stretch out as they locked gazes without moving. Then gradually, with intention, Rusty stood up and walked back to Logan's side. Logan exhaled a shaky breath, relief washing over him. At least for tonight, Rusty had chosen to be with him. The following morning, sunlight streamed through the kitchen windows as Logan poured himself a cup of coffee with trembling hands. His thoughts were consumed by the events of the previous night, Rusty's frantic sprint toward the woods, the uncertainty that had filled the air, and his eventual decision to return. Now Rusty was sitting silently by the back door, his nose almost touching the glass as he gazed into the yard, seemingly still contemplating his choice. Logan took a sip of his coffee, grimacing at its bitter taste. He had hardly slept, and his eyelids felt heavy. A sudden loud knock at the door startled him, causing coffee to spill over the rim of his mug. When he opened the door, a wave of sadness washed over him. A uniformed wildlife officer stood on the porch, a clipboard in his grasp. The badge he wore identified him as Officer James Holloway. He greeted Logan with a polite, "Good morning." Officer Holloway explained that he was from the Wildlife Protection Division and had received reports concerning an illegal exotic pet at Logan's residence. Logan felt his throat tighten with anxiety as he asked what kind of report it was. The officer informed him that several neighbors had reported seeing what looked like a fox being kept as a pet. As Holloway's eyes swept past Logan into the house, he inquired about how long Logan had owned the animal. Logan's thoughts raced as he replied that he had found the fox as a baby during the significant storm back in April, which meant he had been caring for it for about 2 months. Officer Holloway then asked if Logan had the appropriate licenses for keeping a wild animal. Logan attempted to maintain his composure as he responded that he was in the process of obtaining the necessary permits. He added that the fox was completely tame and wouldn't survive in the wild. However, Holloway's expression remained impassive while he took notes on his clipboard. He informed Logan that keeping a wild fox was illegal in their state, no matter how domesticated the animal appeared. He handed Logan an official warning notice, tearing off a yellow slip of paper to give to him. Holloway stated that they would conduct a follow-up visit in 2 weeks, and if Logan did not have the proper permits by then, they would be forced to confiscate the animal. With trembling fingers, Logan accepted the notice, pleading that the fox was not dangerous and felt like family to him. The officer responded that this very attachment was problematic, emphasizing that foxes were not intended to be household pets. Although Holloway's tone softened slightly, he reiterated that there were laws in place for valid reasons. Logan watched, feeling powerless, as Holloway returned to his vehicle and drove away. He slowly closed the door and leaned his forehead against the cool wood, clutching the crumpled warning notice tightly in his hand. Time was slipping away. Logan hunched over his desk, feeling overwhelmed and anxious about his situation. The glow from his computer screen cast long shadows on his weary face as his fingers rapidly typed away at the keyboard. Finalizing his special permit, Logan sat in front of his computer, the glow from the screen casting shadows on his weary face. His fingers moved rapidly over the keyboard as he finalized. Logan watched as Rusty, the fox he had taken in, struggled to adapt to life in a human environment. He was not equipped with the necessary skills for survival, such as hunting. To illustrate this, Logan showed videos on his phone of Rusty attempting to bury kibble among the cushions of the couch, curling up next to Logan's pillow for comfort, and making little chirping sounds to get attention when Logan worked late. Despite various assessments designed to gauge wild animals' behaviors, Rusty had failed them all. Logan explained that Rusty lacked the ability to interact with other foxes, which would make living in a sanctuary a cruel experience for him. The poor animal would be left feeling isolated and confused, desperately needing a sense of stability and routine in his life. Most importantly, he needed the comfort of Logan's presence. Dr. Mark observed the documents presented by Logan, and her demeanor softened somewhat as she viewed the videos. She took a moment to read through Dr. Patel's detailed behavioral analysis thoroughly. After a pause, she expressed her concern based on her experiences, stating that she had seen many instances where individuals, despite having good intentions, tried to domesticate wild animals, and it rarely worked out positively for either side. Logan acknowledged her point, but clarified that his intention was not to treat Rusty as merely a pet. Rather, he wanted to do what was best for the fox. He insisted that Rusty had made the conscious choice to remain with him, even when given the opportunity to leave. Dr. Mark considered Logan's application carefully, indicating she would take the time to review it before reaching a final decision. She reassured Logan that this was the best offer she could provide at that moment. With that, Logan exited the office feeling slightly more hopeful. While it wasn't a definite approval, it also didn't outright reject his request. For the first time since the wildlife officer had visited, he felt a small 56-02. Rusty, the fox, has been influenced by human behavior to the point where he struggles with basic instincts like hunting. Logan showed Dr. Mark various videos on his phone that depicted Rusty's quirky antics, such as trying to hide kibble in the couch cushions, curling up next to Logan's pillow, and making chirping sounds for attention when Logan was working late. Despite his best efforts, Rusty failed every assessment designed to test his skills as a wild animal. Logan explained that Rusty lacks the necessary social skills to interact properly with other foxes, and placing him in a sanctuary would be detrimental since he would likely feel isolated and bewildered. Rusty requires a stable environment and routine, and most importantly, he needs Logan. Logan's voice faltered as he expressed how much Rusty needs a home. Dr. Mark examined the documents presented to her, her demeanor softening slightly as she observed the videos of Rusty. 56-43. She then picked up Dr. Patel's comprehensive behavioral analysis and studied it intently. I've encountered numerous situations where well-intentioned individuals have attempted to keep wild animals as companions," she finally remarked, "and it seldom ends positively for either side." Logan acknowledged this reality but emphasized that his intention isn't merely to keep a wild animal as a pet. Rather, it's about ensuring Rusty's well-being. He pointed out that Rusty chose to remain with him, even though he had the opportunity to leave. Dr. Mark thoughtfully tapped her pen against the desk, deep in consideration. "I will thoroughly review your application before reaching a final decision," she replied. "That is the best I can offer you at this moment." As Logan exited the office, he felt a slight lift in his spirits. Although it wasn't a definitive yes, it also wasn't a no, marking the first time since the wildlife officer's visit that he sensed a glimmer of hope. Suddenly, the station alarm pierced the stillness of the night, pulling Logan from his contemplations. The dispatcher announced a structure fire at Henderson Industrial Park, indicating multiple buildings. As they got closer, an orange glow illuminated the sky, signaling that the warehouse was completely consumed by flames, with fire licking at the metal roof. "We need to control this before it spreads," shouted Captain Rodriguez, trying to be heard over the sound of the roaring fire. "Carter Martinez, take the entrance on the east side," he instructed. Logan adjusted his mask and firmly held onto the hose line, but his thoughts drifted to Rusty, who was left alone at home. He had rushed out without taking the time to ensure everything was secure, and the memory of Rusty's curious chirp as he hurried away lingered in his mind. "Stay focused," he reminded himself. This task required his complete concentration. Inside the warehouse, thick smoke made visibility nearly impossible. Logan and Martinez navigated through the darkness, searching for any victims while fighting against the flames. The heat was overwhelming, even with their protective gear. Suddenly, a loud crack resonated above them, indicating structural instability. Someone shouted a warning over the radio, but before Logan could respond, there was a thunderous crash as a section of the ceiling collapsed between him and Martinez, blocking their exit. Smoke began to pour through the newly created gap, making it difficult to breathe. "Martinez!" Logan called out, his heart racing. The radio buzzed with static as the temperature continued to climb rapidly. He could feel sweat streaming down his face inside the confines of his mask, and his breathing became quicker as the gravity of their predicament sank in. They were trapped. "Hang on!" Voices from outside shouted, reassuring them that help was on the way. Time seemed to stretch indefinitely as Logan listened to his team work diligently to create a passage. Once again, his thoughts turned to Rusty, his bright eyes, playful chirps, and the way he would snuggle against Logan during thunderstorms. The permit application lay untouched in the chaos of his worries. Logan had left some work unfinished on his desk at home when suddenly, Dash grabbed him by the shoulders and pulled him toward an opening that had just been cleared. Eddie's voice rang out clearly, urging them to hurry. As they emerged into the refreshing night air, Logan quickly removed his mask, inhaling deeply to fill his lungs with clean oxygen. The medical team rushed to their side, and he noticed Martinez getting examined nearby. He managed to give a shaky thumbs up, signifying he was okay. Once the paramedics attended to him, Logan wasted no time jumping into his truck. His hands quivered slightly on the steering wheel as he drove home, his turnout gear still saturated with the smell of smoke. Upon bursting through his front door, Logan found himself still coughing from the aftermath. A familiar chirp caught his attention, and Rusty, his beloved pet, emerged cautiously from behind the couch. The red fur of the little fox glowed softly in the low light of the room. Rusty approached Logan with caution, his nose twitching as he assessed the lingering scent of smoke. Just when Logan sank to his knees in relief, Rusty pressed his cool nose against Logan's cheek and let out a soft, worried chirp. A few days later, a plain white envelope rested on Logan's kitchen counter, bearing the official seal of the Wildlife Department in stark contrast against its simplicity. Logan stared at the envelope, his coffee growing cold beside him as he gripped the mug too tightly. Rusty observed from his comfortable spot on the windowsill, his head tilted as if he understood the gravity of the situation. With trembling fingers, Logan finally picked up the envelope, realizing that everything depended on what it contained. His future with Rusty, the little fox who had unexpectedly become part of his family, was at stake. Taking a deep breath, he tore open the envelope, the sound of the tearing paper echoing loudly in the quiet kitchen. He quickly scanned the first part of the document inside. Logan's heart raced in his chest as he absorbed the news. Finally, he spotted the approval. The words jumped out at him, standing out prominently against the clear white paper. He found himself reading it multiple times to fully understand its significance, his eyesight blurring a bit from disbelief. The letter detailed the strict conditions for Rusty's care. It specified that an adequate outdoor enclosure was necessary, complete with certain measurements and safety features such as double-entry gates and fencing that prevented digging. Additionally, regular veterinary checkups were required, alongside meticulous record-keeping of Rusty's diet and behaviors. Although the restrictions regarding public outings for Rusty as a pet seemed daunting, none of that detracted from the fact that Rusty could remain with him. Logan slumped back in his chair, feeling overwhelmed by relief that washed over him in waves, leaving him both weak and exhilarated. Rusty chirped gently before hopping down to explore the unusual behavior of his human, nudging Logan's hand with his cold nose. Just then, the phone rang, startling both of them. It was Dr. Marks, the wildlife veterinarian, who had assisted them with their case. "I wanted to reach out personally," she said, her voice filled with warmth and genuine happiness. "Your case was quite exceptional." Logan felt a swell of pride at her words. She continued, "The dedication you displayed and the evidence you collected made a substantial difference. Not many people would advocate this strongly for a fox, and the board recognized that." Logan's throat constricted with emotion as he managed to express his gratitude. He watched as Rusty curiously examined the fallen envelope. "He's fortunate to have you," she remarked. "Just make sure to adhere strictly to those guidelines, as we will be checking in from time to time." Later that evening, Logan found himself seated on the back porch, observing Rusty as he explored the newly built outdoor enclosure. The space was ample and designed thoughtfully, allowing Rusty plenty of room to roam around comfortably. Logan's backyard has been transformed into a tailored sanctuary for Rusty, featuring climbing platforms, natural elements, and numerous hiding spots that cater to both Rusty's instinctual behavior and the requirements set by the wildlife department. Rusty excitedly explored every nook and cranny of his new environment, with his vibrant red fur glowing in the remaining sunlight as he leaped gracefully from one platform to another. After thoroughly checking out his surroundings, Rusty returned to Logan, leaning against him and emitting a satisfied chirp that seemed to express his approval of the setup. As night fell, stars began to emerge in the darkening sky, shining like promises that had finally been fulfilled. For the first time in several weeks, Logan felt a sense of relief as the tension in his chest dissipated. They were home, safe, and together, exactly where they belonged. Now, a month after obtaining the necessary permits, Logan stood in his backyard, marveling at the incredible transformation that had taken place. What was once merely a plain lawn had become a thoughtfully designed haven for Rusty. The enclosure spanned half of the yard, with robust fencing reaching 10 feet high. Inside, there were naturally styled platforms that created varying elevations for climbing, while skillfully constructed tunnels meandered through artificial hills. Shaded dens were strategically placed throughout the enclosure, providing cool retreats on warm days. Logan had dedicated many weekends to building this space, meticulously adhering to the wildlife department's guidelines down to the finest details. A double-entry gate system was implemented to prevent Rusty from escaping when Logan needed to bring in food or fresh water. Additionally, underground fencing was installed to thwart any escape attempts via digging, although Rusty had shown minimal interest in leaving the confines of his new domain. However, the transition period came with its own challenges. Despite having a beautifully designed outdoor area, Rusty still favored the warmth and security of indoor life. Most days, he would enter the house through his designated door, seeking out his preferred lounging spots, often curling up at Logan's feet or stretching out across the back of the couch. Occasionally, Logan would awaken in the middle of the night to find Rusty sitting on the windowsill, his eyes glowing under the moonlight as he kept watch over his human friend. Meanwhile, at the firehouse, Logan's co-workers continued to playfully tease him about his unconventional pet. During one shift, Eddie came over with a playful expression, holding a small piece of fabric that resembled a miniature version of their firefighting uniforms. "Check this out," Eddie said, proudly showing off the tiny vest. "I thought since he's basically the station's mascot now." Logan laughed and shook his head, replying, "He's not a fire dog, Eddie. He's just Rusty." Eddie responded with a grin, putting the vest away, remarking, "Still, he's the strangest looking dog I've ever seen." However, regardless of the lighthearted jokes, everyone noticed the positive transformation in Rusty. He appeared more lively and playful, as if having the freedom to unleash his wild instincts had awakened a new energy in him. The fox could spend hours exploring his outdoor habitat, darting through tunnels and jumping between platforms with remarkable grace. What impressed Logan the most was Rusty's decision to remain within the confines of the enclosure. Even though the height of the enclosure was not beyond the capabilities of an adventurous fox, Rusty showed no desire to escape. Instead, he established a routine of exploring his outdoor space during the day and returning to Logan's side as evening fell. One serene evening, Logan found himself seated close to the enclosure, enjoying the peaceful surroundings. Rusty was engaged in a playful activity, tossing a small rubber ball around. As he observed the ball bounce, his head tilted in curiosity. Unlike a typical dog that would chase after it, Rusty displayed fox-like agility by pouncing on the ball, successfully trapping it between his front paws. Rolling onto his back, he playfully swatted at the ball, emitting cheerful chirps that brought a smile to Logan's face. "You're certainly not a dog," Logan remarked affectionately as he watched his unique companion. The evening was unusually quiet when Logan suddenly awoke, his heart racing due to an unfamiliar sound. Through the open window, he heard Rusty's distinctive chirps, but they seemed different this time, more urgent and wild. Quickly, Logan tossed aside his blanket and hurried to the back door, feeling the cold wooden floor against his bare feet. Once on the back porch, his eyes adjusted to the darkness. The moonlight cast long shadows across the yard, and in the far corner of Rusty's enclosure, he spotted the source of the disturbance, two sleek figures lurking just beyond the fence. Their red fur was barely visible in the faint light. Wild foxes. Logan gasped, caught off guard by the beauty and untamed nature of these visitors. Their muscles were taut, ready to flee if necessary, and their eyes shone brightly in the dark as they focused on Rusty, who remained alert within his enclosure. In that moment, time seemed to stand still as Logan observed the silent interaction between them. These weren't just any foxes. They embodied what Rusty could have been, free and unrestrained by human limitations. This realization filled Logan with an unexpected sense of longing. Rusty cautiously stepped toward the fence, moving with care and intention, while the wild foxes adjusted their stance in response. Logan felt a heavy weight in the air, but stood firm, anticipating the moment that had haunted him since he learned Rusty's true nature. His heart raced as he faced the possibility that the pull of the wild might outweigh their connection. As another step was taken, Rusty's nose twitched, detecting the scent of the wild foxes. Logan longed to shout and plead for Rusty to remain, yet he understood this decision needed to come from Rusty himself. The wild foxes stood motionless, providing Rusty with a glimpse into an alternative existence, A life filled with freedom, hunting beneath the starlit sky and following ancient instincts ingrained in his very being. Suddenly, Rusty halted, his ears flicking back and forth as he picked up on a sound imperceptible to anyone else. Gradually, he turned his head toward Logan, tilting it in that characteristic manner he always displayed when contemplating a choice. Time seemed to stretch, laden with potential. To Logan's astonishment and relief, Rusty began to retreat from the fence. His movements were calm yet intentional as he distanced himself from the wild foxes. With elegant strides, he walked across his enclosure and approached Logan's side. The wild fox Logan felt the weight of the situation as he stood firm, bracing himself for what was about to unfold. His heart raced in his chest, pounding heavily against his ribcage. This was the moment he had been fearing ever since he learned the truth about Rusty and his true nature. It was the critical point when the allure of the wild could overpower the connection they shared. Rusty took another step forward, his nose twitching as he picked up on the scent of the other foxes. Logan wanted desperately to shout out, to plead with him to remain by his side, but he realized that this decision had to belong solely to Rusty. The wild foxes stood motionless, their presence presenting Rusty with a tantalizing glimpse into an alternative existence, one filled with freedom, where he could hunt beneath the stars and follow the primal instincts that still pulsed within him. Suddenly, Rusty halted, his ears moving back and forth as he detected a sound that was imperceptible to anyone else. Gradually, he turned his head toward Logan, tilting it in that distinctive manner he often did when he was contemplating something important. The moment felt prolonged, charged with potential. To Logan's astonishment and relief, Rusty began to retreat from the fence. He moved slowly yet purposefully, creating space between himself and the wild foxes. With fluid motions, he navigated his enclosure, eventually positioning himself beside Logan. The wild foxes lingered for a moment longer before fading into the shadows, reminiscent of spirits departing, leaving no evidence of their visit apart from Logan's racing heartbeat. Rusty then pressed his face affectionately against Logan's leg, a familiar sign of their bond before hopping onto the porch as if nothing extraordinary had occurred. His actions conveyed a clear message: he had chosen to stay home. The following day, the calm evening at the firehouse was abruptly interrupted by a crackling call over the radio, signaling an urgent matter involving an elderly man. Thomas Wilson had strayed from his residence located near the edge of a forest. As Logan listened to the unfolding account, he felt a knot form in his stomach. The man was 78 years old and showing early signs of dementia. He had last been seen 3 hours prior. Captain Martinez rallied the team for a search and rescue effort as Logan got into the truck alongside Eddie. His thoughts meandered to Rusty. Just that morning, he had observed his fox intensely focused on a rabbit in the backyard, tracking its movements with remarkable precision long before it came into view. The forest loomed dense and shadowy while teams dispersed, wielding flashlights to scour the area. Logan and Eddie took charge of the eastern section, calling out Mr. Wilson's name as they moved their lights through the thick underbrush. "Are you all right?" Eddie asked, noticing that Logan seemed preoccupied. "You look like you're somewhere else." "I'm just thinking," Logan responded, pushing aside some branches as they navigated through the thicket. "I've been thinking about Rusty, actually how he tracks things, and how aware he is of his surroundings." Eddie raised an eyebrow and inquired, "What's going on in that mind of yours?" Logan hesitated for a moment, allowing an idea to take shape. Perhaps there was a way for Rusty to assist in searches like this one. "His senses are incredible, better than any dog I've ever seen," he remarked. Later that evening, after they successfully located Mr. Wilson, who was curled up under a fallen tree, Logan decided to take Rusty to the woods behind his home. The fox moved with determination, constantly sniffing around, while its ears turned to pick up every sound. Logan watched in awe as Rusty followed the trail of a nocturnal creature through the underbrush without losing track of it. The subsequent days blended into a whirlwind of research and phone calls. Logan reached out to Dr. Marks to discuss his proposal of training Rusty for search and rescue operations. To his astonishment, she didn't immediately reject the idea. There had been some research conducted on domesticated foxes in Europe, she mentioned thoughtfully. Their sense of smell is extraordinary, and they can sometimes navigate challenging terrains better than dogs. However, it would require careful management. They gathered to explore the potential, with Dr. Marks bringing along documentation about similar initiatives. He explained how Rusty's innate skills could be harnessed for a significant purpose. That evening, Logan found himself in the backyard, sitting with Rusty as he gently scratched behind the fox's ears. The animal leaned into his touch, emitting soft chirps. "You saved me once, buddy," Logan whispered, reminiscing about the difficult times before he discovered Rusty. "Maybe now we can aid others." Rusty responded by nudging Logan's hand with his nose, chirping again, as if to indicate his agreement. The autumn evening transformed the sky into hues of amber and gold as Logan relaxed on his back porch, marking the 1-year anniversary of that stormy night when he found Rusty. A crisp chill filled the air, bringing with it the scent of fallen leaves and distant wood smoke. Rusty lay next to him, dozing peacefully, his red fur catching the final rays of sunlight. He had blossomed into his wild elegance, no longer the frightened kit Logan had initially thought was a puppy. His coat had become thick and luxurious, and his movements were elegant and confident. The special permit tag dangling from his collar sparkled in the dimming light, serving as a reminder of their hard-won right to be together. Logan smiled as he recounted their journey, the DNA test that altered everything, the struggle to keep Rusty, and ultimately, their unexpected venture into search and rescue work. Just last week, Rusty had been a crucial part of a rescue mission. A lost hiker was located thanks to the tracking of their scent, which was particularly challenging due to tough terrain that even police dogs found difficult to navigate. The firehouse had become a second home for Rusty, and even Sparky, the Dalmatian at the station, had grown accustomed to having a fox around. The crew made sure to keep special treats in the break room for Rusty, although he still preferred to sneak them when no one was watching. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows over the yard, Logan contemplated how significantly his life had transformed since Rusty's arrival. Prior to Rusty becoming part of his life, Logan's days were filled with work and his house was quiet and empty. Now there was always some form of activity or energy present, whether it was Rusty's playful sounds or his calm, watchful demeanor. Rusty let out a stretch and then snuggled closer to Logan, who appreciated the companionship. Nearby stood an outdoor enclosure, symbolizing their agreement between allowing Rusty to explore his wild instincts while also enjoying the comforts of home. However, Rusty rarely spent time in the enclosure except for play. He preferred to curl up on the couch or by Logan's feet in bed. As darkness settled in and the first stars appeared in the sky, Rusty became alert. His ears perked at the sound of leaves rustling. His sharp senses tuned into the nighttime activities of the animals in the surrounding forest. Rusty stood up, his tail swishing gently as he focused on the woods. Logan observed him, pondering if Rusty ever missed his previous life, the one that could have been had circumstances not changed during that stormy night. The allure of the wild sometimes seemed to draw Rusty's attention, evident in how he watched the forest and reacted to the sounds of the night. But just as Logan's thoughts began to solidify, Rusty turned back to him. Fox pressed his forehead against Logan's arm in a distinctive manner, one that reflected his unique personality. It was a gesture that didn't fully embody wildness nor complete domestication, but instead was something uniquely characteristic of Rusty. After this moment, he settled down once more, curling himself into a compact ball next to Logan's chair. Logan couldn't help but smile gently at the sight. In truth, Rusty had the freedom to leave whenever he wanted. The enclosure wasn't capable of truly restraining him if he made the decision to escape. Yet, night after night, Rusty opted to remain, consciously choosing the life they had created together. If you appreciated the tale of Logan and Rusty, I have carefully selected another story for you that I believe you will enjoy just as much. Please be sure not to overlook this one. Click here to watch it,